Here's our commitment to you. And our goal as a client experience team is to really provide you with that strategic guidance, implementation expertise, and innovating best practices that will help DreamBox become a successful resource for you and all your students. And so today, during our time together, we're going to begin that conversation with how are you implementing DreamBox so we can learn more from one another and enhance our routines? And then we're going to dive deeper into how we can leverage DreamBox to support our students with interventions, as well as some guidance with using station rotation in a remote setting. The goal of this time is to share ideas. Hold on, I just got a message on my dashboard. I got scared it was going to restart. Okay. Back to what I was saying about our goal is to really share those ideas. We really know that you all are working hard and we're trying to do our best. And this is just a perfect opportunity for all of us to learn and grow together as one community, especially since we're all connected by that common goal. We all want our students to be successful. We all want to unlock that learning potential in every child and also increase the velocity of their learning journey, especially during this time. And so during our presentation today, feel free to collaborate by just jumping right in. If you have an idea to share without worrying about interrupting others. We know it's different with Zoom, especially if our cameras are turned off. Or if you feel more comfortable, please feel free to share your ideas in the chat. We really just want to hear from you and use this unique opportunity to connect ourselves as one community to help all our students. So with that being said, are you guys ready to get started?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I am too. And so just before, thinking about it, I wanted to let you know that I once in your shoes last year, in fact. As a former educator of 20 years, I found myself especially thinking hard about your journey this school year, especially with the complexities of COVID. Normally in October, our routines are established and structures are in place for learning. And then today, these routines and structures may be just settling in as we're preparing our lessons to teach face-to-face, online, or maybe a hybrid of both. And it's very fluid right now. It's ever changing. So it's definitely a different year for all of us. And the blended learning structures that some of us may be trying to use to facilitate learning and to implement DreamBox may include, maybe you're doing a station rotation, or maybe you're doing a lab setting. Maybe you're doing a flipped classroom or using an enriched virtual model. And those are just some of those structures that we have in place. And then, thinking about implementing DreamBox, maybe you're implementing it asynchronously. So that way students are able to work independently and learn at their own pace. Or maybe you're using DreamBox synchronously to help support your core instruction. Whichever your structure may be, we wanted to give you this opportunity to share with each other what's going well and then also talk about what's not going so well with implementing DreamBox. So that way we can learn and lean on each other during this challenging school year. So let's begin with a conversation on how are you currently implementing DreamBox this year? Are you brand new and just getting started? Are you already, embedding it in your classroom routines? And if so, how are you doing that? Feel free to unmute yourself and share your things that you're doing, or you can put feedback in the chat feature.
Brand new.
Brand new, and I see Cheryl is also saying that she's brand new as well. Getting started. Well, welcome. We're very happy that you're here. And so have your students started using DreamBox at all yet, or are you waiting to get that routine set up? Yep.
No.
Well, this is definitely a good opportunity for us because we'll share some good information to help you get started, but also feel free to stop and ask questions as you're thinking on. So that way, we could help, you as much as possible as well as your other students. And the first thing that we like to do before we start sharing some ideas is really help solidify a deep understanding of what DreamBox is and how it's supporting our students. We feel that the more you know about what DreamBox is doing on the inside that we can't see when our students are playing those lessons, the more you'll understand how that program is adapting to meet their needs and understand our best practices as well. So with that being said, I'm going to share with you a quick video on our intelligent adaptive engine. During this time, when you're watching a video, I want you to think about what DreamBox is doing to help support our students with their learning. And then after the video, I'll stop to help answer any questions or share your takeaways as a team. Let me go ahead and click play.
As educators, we know that every student comes to class with a different level of math ability. Yet we teach a single process to an entire class at the same time. To give the best possible education to my kids, we actually need a teaching assistant for every student. We looked for math software to help. I found that many programs took a typical lesson and just converted it to a digital textbook. Another claimed to be adaptive, but all it did was move students faster or slower through the exact same lessons. But one was a revolutionary change: true adaptive learning. DreamBox is the only program designed with an intelligent adaptive learning engine. It starts helping students immediately and continuously assesses exactly where students are and adapts to how they learn in real time. DreamBox measures how students are thinking within the lessons, constantly individualizing what each student sees next. In fact, as a single student works on DreamBox for 1 minute, the program collects, analyzes, and responds to over 800 pieces of information about that student and how they learn. That's 48,000 pieces of data every hour, providing the most personalized learning experience possible. The results are amazing. The kids love it. They think DreamBox looks like a game. I think it looks like a teaching assistant for every student. A teaching assistant with infinite patience, unlimited data, and a perfect memory. With the help of DreamBox, I can give each of my students the education they deserve.
So I'll go ahead and pause it there. Any questions that you have about the video or what the Intelligent Adaptive Engine is doing, or thoughts?
As educators, we know that every student
must have that on a loop. That happened last time. So watching that video, what did that make you think of? The one thing that comes to my mind as I'm thinking about the Intelligent Adaptive Engine is all the differentiation that we have to do in the classroom as teachers. As you know, we have different groups of students and we're meeting their needs, and we're trying to do our best with all the data that we have to make these decisions to help support. And ideally, you know, when we look at students' math work and we see how they're solving those problems and we talk to them, you know, we try to get insight into what their misconceptions are. So that way we could help strengthen their understanding by providing them, you know, with better use of strategies or whatever they need to develop the deep conceptual understanding of the content. And we know how hard that is too. And as a classroom teacher, you're juggling and managing all this at the same time. And our students' needs vary from one degree to the other. And the beauty of DreamBox is with our intelligent adaptive engine, we're able to meet their needs where they need it to move them forward in their learning. And so when we think about, you know, the lessons our students are completing, I'm going to share this slide with you real quick. So these are our learning environments in DreamBox. And when students are engaged in completing lessons, you know, K2 will have a primary environment, grades 3 through 5, and 6 through 8 will have a little bit of looking environment. But as they're completing and they're working on those lessons, they're able to access all content from kindergarten all the way up to the end of 8th grade to the beginning parts of algebra. And so no matter where they're at in their learning journey, our DreamBox will meet their needs to help them move forward or fill in any foundational gaps that they need to help them understand our grade level standards. I know, Lewis, you were sharing with me and Cheryl that you guys are both in, you know, Illinois. What grades do you guys teach? Oh, you teach K through 8. Okay. And so the best thing to think about when your students are in DreamBox and are completing lessons, let's say we have like a 7th grader, working, completing lessons, and the 7th grader may have some, need to, or needs a review on like fractions, and so the 7th grader may be working on some 5th grade standards in fractions because maybe the student just doesn't have a solid understanding, conceptual understanding of fractions, like, what's happening to them when we multiply or divide our fractions. And so with our program, our 7th grade student will have the ability to be able to have access to that 5th grade content while still working in this environment. And then on the flip side, if we have like a 3rd grader who's ready to move on to advanced content, our DreamBox Intelligent Adaptive Engine will allow them to go ahead and start beginning that content when they're showing demonstration and true conceptual understanding. Our program is really learning the learner as the learner learns and is developing a true depth of knowledge. And those lessons are automatically assigned to them. There's nothing that we need to do. It's because DreamBox Intelligent Adaptive Engine, just like in that video, is constantly analyzing every mouse click, is looking to see, what the student is doing to solve those problems, what strategies, how long is the student taking, is the student needing any scaffold support? And then it's determining, with all that data, what would be the next best lesson until the student is able to demonstrate a solid understanding of that content within their grade level. And if they need extra help, it will move back to fill in those gaps. It's following the coherence of our standards. So all that learning is connected to help give them that true deep mathematical comprehension. Any questions about that? Do you see anything in the chat?
No.
No, I think we look like we're caught up.
Okay, very good. And so when let me grab my slide again. When we have our students working and engaged in, start to complete those lessons, we have some best practices that we recommend for our learners. Our research shows that 5 or more lessons a week is that true inflection point for deep mathematical comprehension. So you'll hear us talk about, those lesson completion, and we want to strive for our learners to complete 5 or more lessons, not so much the time. Dr. Hudson from DreamBox Learning had a great quote. He said, "If time is constant, then achievement will vary. But if achievement is constant, time will vary." Meaning that lessons, and our goals that we have for our learners, if we, have a learner that may need more time, then we can increase their goal and maybe give them 7. Just depends on everybody's unique needs. We also recommend, giving feedback. They're going to get feedback within their lessons, but then there's this great way for you to send feedback with the messaging feature to our learners. And then, we recommend monitoring their progress in the dashboard at least once a week. And Melissa's going to go into the dashboard so that way you can make sense of the standards report and how to organize those groups. But when you go in there, you could also monitor the usage to ensure that students are meeting their goals, and then also helping them if they have any of these academic alerts that will be written in your dashboard. So that way you could see, who's has those alerts, and then you could dig deeper to see what you could do to help them. And if you need any information, Danielle is going to share it with you, and there's going to be a follow-up email as well on how to get families at home engaged and how to help them receive some information to get support, and even learning how to set up a parent portal of their own. And so, if we could reach all learning guardians for each individual student, we know it's a win-win situation. And when you are thinking about, scheduling time in DreamBox, on average, it takes anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes for students to complete lessons. It really just depends on whether they're primary or intermediate. In primary, it could take about 8 to 12 minutes, and intermediate could take about 12 to 15 minutes. But if you schedule like 15 to 20 minute sessions for students to complete lessons, that will help maximize that learning. And you could do that a few times a week. So that way our students can hit their goals of 5 or more. Here's just, some recommendations of setting daily goals. So that way students can complete those lessons. If you do like 1 or 2 lessons every day, if you're teaching it asynchronously, or you having them complete those lessons asynchronously, that structure can give them the guidance that they need to meet their goals. And then maybe on the 5th day, they can take that time to reflect. They can reflect on their progress. They can reflect on ways that they demonstrated a growth mindset, or even share a new strategy that they learned with you. If you're teaching, face to face and synchronously, Melissa's going to talk to you about like how we could even use DreamBox lessons in small groups to help support our students' learning. But then you can tell your students, your goal is 5. And if you want to set up like 2 times a week, 30-minute sessions, whatever works best with your schedule. It depends on how much time you have for math, and then thinking about, how would you balance that? Any questions or thoughts around scheduling time? Just out of
Rotation. And when you're doing intervention groups, it would be good.
Yeah. Say that again. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You said you were talking about scheduling time for the kids to do it.
Yeah.
So you could embed it, also, just during the time when you're doing a station rotation model. You have your teacher table, and then you could go ahead and have, a group of kids, working on their computers, and then a collaborative.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. Thank you for sharing that. I do have some teachers do that because devices are limited in their classroom. They're not one-to-one. I'm sorry about the dinging, but they're not one-to-one, and so that station rotation definitely helps. One principal I was working with said that she did not want technology to be a barrier. So if students didn't have enough time during the day to complete their lessons, she would let them come in like 15 minutes early just for them to log into DreamBox and work on trying to meet their goals, for just 15 minutes early before the day starts for morning work. And so that's another way, you could help students get in to complete lessons. The last group that we talked to, I believe was it a 90-minute block of math time? And so they were able to schedule an intervention time to have their students in the station rotation model complete those lessons during that time. The other thing I did learn after talking to some more educators is the ones that are virtual, they need some structure. And so that's where, maybe telling them, complete 1 or 2 lessons a day might be the structure that they need in that, asynchronous environment that they're working in. Thank you for sharing. Are there any other thoughts or questions that you have while we're talking about, integrating DreamBox into your daily routine? I'm guessing their silence means that we're good. And so I'm going to go ahead and switch gears and let Melissa talk you through, some of the data that we can collect after our learners are completing those lessons, and then how we can organize it to create small groups and even create assignments to meet their needs. So Melissa, go ahead.
Thanks, Jackie. Hi, everybody. We're so glad that you are spending your time with us today. We know how precious it is right now, especially in COVID. So one of the things that we're going to talk about for the next 10 or so minutes is supporting intervention in at-risk students. And it sounds like this is a relevant topic for a lot of our participants on with us now. So Samantha, you mentioned that you could use this in a station rotation during your intervention time, which is amazing. And that's what Kendra is going to talk more about, the logistics of the stations. But for right now, we're going to talk about some of the data you can use in DreamBox to make sure that you're giving them appropriate assignments that are matching their deficit area or some of the skills that they're maybe haven't finished yet. So we know that the requirements and procedures may vary in each of your states and local districts, but at the heart of intervention work, there's always 3 main components, and that is identifying areas to strengthen, taking action by providing a strategic sequence of lessons, and finally monitoring the progress that they've made. So we're going to take a look at the warehouse of data available to you inside your Teacher Insight dashboard, some quick actions you can take to provide each of your students a data-driven pathway to success, and how you can monitor how quickly students are filling in unfinished learning. So after you log in, whether it's by your SSO or through our main URL, you will land on our home page, which defaults to this page if you have sections with a classroom. If some of you are special education teachers that have admin access, this is going to look a little bit different for you, and we'll be happy to answer questions about that at the end if that applies to anyone. So the data on this homepage reflects lesson completion and the time spent in DreamBox for the current week. You can also toggle back to the previous week here. This is a place where you can quickly find any student who's having difficulty by scrolling to the Alerts and Achievements section at the bottom of the page. So if you'll notice under May Needs Attention, this student has been unsuccessful 3 times in each of the lessons displayed. So what I might want to do for some quick remediation is call this student up to my desk, or maybe I have them on Zoom in a breakout room, and I click the View Student button for them, or the View the Student Activity button, and then we can play that lesson together. They can walk me through the strategies they used, or I can view that and plan some assessing questions to help gain insight into their thinking. So for more intentional intervention work, our adaptive engine is of course going to collect the 48,000 data points an hour that we saw in the video earlier, and it's going to house all of it in your standards report for you. Most of the time, students will be working on the just right lessons that our program provides them, but sometimes, especially in intervention work, you're going to want to do some intentional assignments with students. So we're really trying to target a certain area, maybe in the major work. So I'm going to click right in standards, and then I'm going to see my class's standards report. Right now, you're probably wrapping up the first quarter of the year. This 4th grade class is the same. They've been working on multiplying with place value strategies and the properties of operations that are found in 4 NBT B5. I can see from the report that some of my students are struggling to use or to meet the whole standard. I do see that Chelsea has mastered the entire NBT domain because she's got green circles in her row for that entire domain there. I do see other students are in progress toward proficiency as evidenced by the half-filled blue circles, and a few haven't started as noted because they're empty. So now's the time to make some strategic decisions around how we're going to approach each set of students. To learn more about Chelsea and the other students showing mastery, I can reference the individual standards report to provide enrichment, or I can just let the adaptive engine keep working in the background to provide next steps for them. For all the other students, the ones that are in progress and the ones that haven't started, I'm going to go ahead and take a look back at the 3rd grade class report. So if I click on the 3 at the top of the page, it takes me back to the 3rd grade report for my class, the same children. I have sorted this one by 3 OAB5. In that standard, students are using the distributive property to multiply, and I can see that some of them have mastered this, but others are still working here. Because I have this information at my fingertips, I can see that it might be impeding our work in 4th grade. Additionally, I noticed that some have mastered the distributive property, but they're still working in the 3 NBT A3 standard, which is multiplying by multiples of 10. So this could also be impeding my work in 4th grade. For now, I'm going to click on the 3 OA5, and I'm going to make some choices based on the student groups that it's going to sort. As soon as I click the calendar icon at the top of the page, it's going to take me to my assignments home, where I can make this a long-term assignment for these students. Initially, when you click on this page, in the top left corner, you can see there's a short-term and a long-term assignment. Because I'm doing intervention work and I'm going to work on maybe a set of skills, a whole standard, or maybe even a whole domain, I am going to use the long-term assignment here. If I just wanted to do some quick formative work, let's say I'm going to start a unit on division. in my tier 1 instruction, and I just want to quickly assess, I may assign them a short-term assignment. But since we're in our intervention groups, I'm going to choose long-term. I'm going to assign it for 4 weeks. Because I use the standards report to get here, DreamBox is already going to automatically pre-fill the grade level, domain, and standard, and all I have to select is the assignment type and the duration. DreamBox also sorts the students into 3 groups. It's the 3 groups we saw on the standards report. The students who have already mastered the standard are not defaulted to receive the assignment, so they're not checked. Students in progress, as well as those who have not started, are checked, meaning that the system is going to default that assignment to them unless I change that. So I'm going to choose to let my in progress students go ahead and finish this standard out. And then I'm going to make some decisions based on what I know about students for the ones that haven't started. I can also preview the lessons that will be assigned just above the student list to ensure the content is what is needed right now in their DreamBox journey. If you want more information on how to make assignments, Danielle is going to put a link to a support article in there. I know we went through this really quickly and we will have time for questions in just a second. Before we get to questions, I do want to show you the report that's generated from a long-term assignment. This is an example of one that's already been completed. DreamBox is going to generate this report for each student as they work through a long-term assignment like the one we just created. At this point, you can check progress each week to see if adjustments need to be made. The graph displays each student's progress over time, and the lessons assigned to each student can be viewed here as well. For more information about these metrics and to dive deeper, there's going to also be a support article in the chat for you. One of the things that teachers really love about this report is that it does validate a lot of the data that you're already collecting for RTI or MTSS program. So this is something we found that is beneficial for not just classroom teachers, but special ed teachers and school psychologists. I know I went through that really fast. I do want to go back and review with you exactly how I got to that assignments page, and then we'll stop and ask questions. So from this reports screen here, we have a couple of options. We can go the way we did and assign it through the standards tab, the report we looked at, or if you look to that adjacent box there, assignment history, that's another place you can click and it's going to take you back to the assignments home, but it will not automatically pre-fill those assignments for you. When you're in a situation using for intervention groups, it might be easier to go from the standards page. So if we click there one more time, Jackie, it takes us back to our report. And anytime you see those blue calendar icons, it's going to take you right back to that assignments page where we were so you can make them. Again, assignments are not necessary, but sometimes you might want to use them when you're trying to do strategic things with students, especially closing gaps in big domains or major work from prior grade levels. So I am going to take a pause right here and answer any questions that you have. I know some of you are special educators on the line and may have some for me right now. And also, Danielle, if there's anything in the chat, let me know.
No, I think we're in great shape, but I'd love to hear what the thoughts are of our attendees around how this might help their specific population of students.
Okay, we do have a question about getting to the reports page again. Jackie, would you go back to the home screen, that page first? Maybe back one more. Okay, so when you log in, you're going to be here where that star is. See, that's where the home is. When you click on reports, it takes you to the next screen that has the assignments on it, and then also the standards report where you can make assignments from there. Oh, progress reports. Okay, you would just click on that standards tile right there, and that's gonna take you into your class standards report. And what it does default to the grade level that the students are rostered in or that the class is tied to. But at the top there, you can see that you can scroll back to, all of their historical data is there. I know if some of you are working with special needs students, you may need to toggle back, 1 to 2 grade levels, maybe even more, to see, what it is they can do, which we know is so important to directing their learning. Does anyone have any ideas about how they might use this with special education students or an intervention group? Or, just provide some feedback on if this is a report that you find helpful.
Cheryl offered in the chat that this will be helpful in relating back to the work in the classroom. So it's really important to think about this as the video said, this teaching assistant to provide you with some data points that will inform your direct instruction or even your small group work. And whether you use this data or you end up using an assignment or something of that nature, it's both going to help with that specific student pathway. It says here, without having used in the past, will the assessment establish their assignments? So Melissa, would you like to talk through a little bit about the DreamBox adaptive engine and how actually students get started in DreamBox?
Yes, sure. So DreamBox, there's no assessment for students to have to take. As soon as they enter, they are already feeling like they're playing in our system. And it is game-like and engaging for students. So they don't ever feel like they're taking a multiple choice test. Once they start that work, our engine is going to start collecting all of those data points that we saw in the video, and it's going to progress them through a path similar to what you're seeing here. So if we see there's a red dot and a purple dot, we can see that both students, we'll just say they're both 4th graders from the class we just looked at. The purple student might be Chelsea, who's moving right along. She's going through each domain and she's mastering many things. But the red student is maybe needing some more foundational work. So you can see that the red student's moving a little bit more slowly. They may have to do a lesson or 2 again, or they may need a more scaffolded lesson. DreamBox is going to do all of that work for you and really be those extra set of hands that you need so much right now. If you are on an intervention pathway and you want a student to focus on a certain domain, that's when you can make assignments. So that's when you would use that assignments tile that we saw, or you can go straight from the standards report to make those data-driven decisions for your students. One of the things I feel like I co-taught for a long time. So I was the gen ed teacher and I had a co-teacher with me. I also supervised the RTI program. One of the things I wished I had while I was in the classroom was this kind of data so that I could speak with my special education teacher, because she was, my true partner with the students. So this would be a great jumping off point for us as we're thinking about, providing modifications on an assessment, or if we're going to scaffold learning inside the classroom. All of this data could inform our work and make us even a little bit more productive. Any other questions? And yes, Danielle did put in the chat that students do start in their seated grade level. Because we do have special educators on the line, if you have students that are maybe getting really frustrated and their zone of proximal development is not on grade level, maybe it's 2 years behind, we can do some of that resetting for you. You just need to submit a ticket to support@dreambox.com. You can print one of the students' progress reports. You would, at the top where it says classroom, if you selected one student, all of these tiles would default just for that student. So if you have picked an individual student, once you clicked on standards report, it would only be their progress report. Is that helpful, Noelle?
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes,
sure.
That's helpful.
The one thing I'd like to add is with DreamBox, the more you click, the more you know. A lot of these links are hyperlinked, or a lot of the tiles are hyperlinked. The students' names and the reports are also hyperlinked. And so like for Chelsea, if I clicked on her name, it would take me to her individual standards report too. And so don't be afraid to click on anything, because it could give you, the information that you need at a quicker pace.
Thanks, Jackie. One of the things to remember about DreamBox is just because it's not blue doesn't mean you can't click it. So go ahead and do whatever you need to. Click on everything. You can't break it. If you get lost, just log out, log right back in.
That's true.
All right, if we don't have any more questions, I am going to let Kendra take over so that she can share with us some of the logistics around station and remote rotation and remote learning.
Thank you, Jackie and Melissa. You set us up perfectly for this next part. Just kind of getting a feel for what you guys are already doing. It sounds like a lot of you have experienced a little bit and explored a little bit, but you're still not right at that confident stage of it. So hopefully as we get through the conversation around station rotation and remote learning, you might have some different things that you may want to explore a little deeper in your own classrooms and try to expand what the students can do with DreamBox and how you can impact your instruction with the data that you guys have discussed today, or where you can locate that in the dashboard. So we're going to go ahead and move into the conversation. So face-to-face and virtual learning may seem somewhat independent of each other. However, many of the best practices utilized with in-person instruction can be implemented in a virtual setting with a few slight adjustments. There are many variations of how to structure your stations, and this is just one example that incorporates a teacher-led instruction component, collaborative activities and stations, and online instruction. This particular image comes from one of our DreamBox blog posts that was written by our Chief Learning Officer, Dr. Tim Hudson. However, depending on your schedule and your outcomes that you want to see from the rotation, you may do it a little bit differently. You might have collaborative stations that are throughout the whole day and it only happens once a week. Or you may have it where you break them apart and have different stations every day that the students visit. It's really dependent upon what you'd like to see and what you want as an outcome for that particular station. We are going to spend a lot of time talking about what that rotation model can look like in a remote setting. And we'll also talk a little bit about how it compares to your traditional setting where you're in person. Before we move into that, I just kind of want to open it up and see how many of you guys have some virtual learning components going on right now. Either you're fully remote or you have some type of a hybrid instruction or you're all face-to-face. Just kind of want to gauge and see where you guys are at.
Sounds like some hybrid model. So hybrid, is that possibly partially seated, partially remote? Yes, thank you, Cheryl.
Yes, okay. Are there any others who would like to share?
Are there any other districts that are fully remote right now? It doesn't look like it. So I think we're ready to move on, Kendra.
That's great. All right. So Danielle dropped a link in there that will help you kind of explore a little bit more about some different alternatives to how you might want to structure your station rotation. The article, if you don't choose to read it, they do have some great visuals in there that I think can be helpful for you trying to think outside of the box of how you might want to incorporate that. Here on this screen, when we talk traditional versus virtual station rotation model, you'll notice that a lot of the components are very much the same. There's just a few little tweaks here and there that you may have to think about. So for example, anytime you have a station rotation model happening in your classroom, you're going to have to review expectations with your students. What is it they're going to have to do? How are they going to get the materials and all of the other things that come along with that? You'll probably have collaborative groups. You'll probably have some type of technology and manipulatives. It'll be data driven and you'll have some type of feedback, just to name a few things that will be incorporated in it. But when you look at your traditional versus virtual, when you think manipulatives, it may look a little different. In your face-to-face, you're going to have concrete manipulatives where the students can actually physically touch them and move them and manipulate them. But in the virtual setting, you aren't going to have that opportunity unless the students have them at home. So something that you may incorporate are virtual manipulatives to help them still be able to connect to the manipulatives and try to build that understanding in a conceptual manner. Another component that may change is your activity sheets. You may have something where the students can work on the paper in person, sitting down with groups and doing paper, pencil, all of that. But when you get to the virtual setting, it may have to become more of an interactive type activity sheet where they are doing things on the actual web page and interacting with what's going on in that
activity that you have provided for them in a different manner. So thinking through how you're going to give them the same opportunities that you're wanting to do, whether they were face-to-face or traditional, or things you may have to play around with and be a little bit more creative to help them get that same type of instruction. You'll also probably have to move from having a teacher station where you have the students come to you, or where you're able to walk around and talk to the students at their groups, to moving more into some type of an online platform and figuring out how that same type of communication will happen. It may look a little different. It may not be exactly the same, but you can still utilize those online platforms to help you get the same outcomes that you're wanting to see, whether they were in person or virtual. Okay. And so here, we're going to talk just a little bit about the expectations of a station rotation. I know that some of you have talked about that you are already implementing stations in your classrooms. I heard one person as an example say that you could possibly have the students just come to you and sit at the table, or have them at a table on their own where they're able to do DreamBox independently and just do all of the different activities. Thinking about all the other stations that you may have incorporated in that, what are some things that kind of stand out to you that are components that you feel that you've really had to make sure you hit hard in either a virtual setting or a traditional face-to-face setting? Oh, wait, go back, Jackie. Can you go back to the previous slide for me? Oh, wait. Yes, this one. Okay. So to bring back the question again, it was just to kind of engage and see how many of you have a certain expectation that you found is something that you really have to focus on with your students, whether it's been a face-to-face or a virtual environment. And feel free to unmute if it makes it a little easier if you want to share. That's okay. And just in my thinking, when I was in the classroom or when I was supporting educators, I really found that oftentimes educators didn't have the conversation around expectations. But if they did, something that they really focused on was more of the voice level or how to get the materials. Those things may not necessarily be ones that you'll focus on with virtual learning, because it is something in a remote setting you may not have to implement as much. So for example, you aren't going to tell them you have to make sure you're on a level 1 when you're in a virtual setting. You have to whisper to each other, or you have to sit and talk to each other only where the people at the group table can hear you. Whereas in the virtual learning setting, it's just going to be you guys talk when you're in that setting, if you have some type of a breakout room or collaborative session for them. Something you may have to focus on in virtual learning that you may not do as much in face-to-face is talking about internet use. How to use the internet, how to use the computer, how to make sure that they understand, only go to these links, don't go to different tabs, talking about internet safety. Those are things that you won't have to think about when you're talking about your station rotations. This is just a list to kind of give you examples of expectations that you may have to talk about. But as you can see, like I said, face-to-face versus virtual, a lot of them are the same, just certain variations among that. One other thing that stands out to me is when you talk about roles. I know that there are some educators who have roles when they have the students working in collaborative groups, and those roles may look different when you're traditional versus virtual. You may need somebody who is going to make sure the screen is being shared when you're in a virtual learning setting, whereas you don't have to worry about that if you're in person. You may have somebody who has to go and get the materials and bring them back to the table in an in-person, whereas you may not have that in virtual, but you may need to have somebody who is making sure that everybody is able to have their voice heard, or helping them know how to press the mic button or the chat feature if they need support there. So just a couple of different things to help you really explore what that could look like in your classrooms when you're trying to move into the remote setting for your station rotations. Go ahead, Jackie. Thank you. All right. So going back to the remote focus, You do have the ability to choose whether it's going to be a synchronous rotation station model or if it's going to be a asynchronous model. So like Jackie talked to you guys before, of course, you know, synchronous is going to be during that live instruction. So just as you would in person, you're going to have opportunities for the students to work during the math content block, but it's in a remote setting. So you may have breakout rooms, such as like on Zoom, you can have the students go into different rooms and work collaboratively with each other on different activities that you've chosen for them to support their learning. I would not recommend breakout rooms with the lower grades like kinder and first unless you have an additional person like as an aide or a paraprofessional who can be in those rooms with the students to help them navigate what the instructions are and what they need to do. It may just be too much for them to try to do all of that on their own. But if you are able to structure that in your synchronous learning time, that's a great opportunity for your students to collaborate with each other. Just thinking through a couple of things I have there on the table that you may also want to consider is what type of communication method will your students have to use? How are they going to share their learning? Are they going to do it as screenshots? Are they going to share their screen? Just some thinking points for you with the synchronous learning. The asynchronous, of course, is outside of live instruction. So you may have it where the students are working independently on whatever you have for them as an activity. You could incorporate things such as choice boards, where it's like a bingo mat and they get to choose the different activities based off of the options you've provided. Or you could even schedule time outside of class for them to be able to get together in their own groups and work collaboratively. You'll still need to think about how they're going to communicate, how you will communicate instructions or provide other links for them. So it may have to be pre-recorded, and also how they're going to share their learning. All of these are things that will help you provide opportunities for your students to to extend their learning based on what you're noticing from the instruction. So Melissa provided some great tidbits of how you can go into that dashboard and locate the data and use that to figure out what activities you want to focus on based on the standards that you see they may need support. So DreamBox is also able to help support you in that way, not just only allowing the students to get on DreamBox and work on DreamBox on their own, but you, the teacher, have resources available to you to help support that. One of them is the teacher tools. Danielle has dropped that link in the chat for you. It's an opportunity for you to gain some insight into some of the high priority standards that we have there. It provides a sample mini lesson that you can use with your students. It gives you the virtual manipulatives that goes along with that particular lesson. It also links to a DreamBox lesson that goes along with that particular small group lesson that they have provided there. They're great resources, and it's an opportunity for you to kind of see how else you can continue to push and extend that learning that the students are receiving in DreamBox and make it a little bit more impactful in order for them to continue to close some of those gaps. Also, Melissa talked about the play lesson feature in the activity feed where you can see what the students are actually doing to gain a little bit more insight, and that can help you determine what you want to focus on with them, as well as the assignments feature. We also have student teacher messaging that allows you to give feedback to your students, engage them, encourage them, continue to help motivate them. There's lots of things you can do with that, but all of those are very impactful to help support DreamBox and what your students are doing. And then the last one there, student reflection resources that we have available on the dashboard can be a great opportunity for your students to reflect on the learning that they're doing, not only on DreamBox, but what they're doing in the classroom as well. Can you go to the next slide for me? And here's a great example of something that you can do with the learning, with the data that you found in the dashboard. Melissa talked about how a student in fourth grade may have been struggling with multiplication based off of a third grade standard. So going in and seeing what the student may have been working on in a particular lesson, when you explored that, you may have come up with a screenshot that would be perfect to have some open-ended conversations around. So you could easily take a screenshot of part of that lesson and have it to where you can either, as a collaborative opportunity, allow the students to answer questions such as, what do you notice about the grasshopper jumps? Or how might you determine the total distance jump, to provide different ways to solve that? or it could be a small group where you bring them to you and you guys talk about that conversation, or it can be an independent activity, but it's a way to engage them a little bit more in their thinking, to help push them to get some conceptual understanding, to recognize what's happening with the patterns and how to be able to make connections there, and even extend the conversation to, okay, what are some things that you've been noticing in your lessons? How can you continue to incorporate that and build on that knowledge? So these are just a few conversations that you can have with your students. Definitely taking that data to help make sure that you're incorporating activities that fit with what your students' needs are, and using DreamBox to help support that. Are there any questions or anything that you would like to share that you may have found helpful when you are in your small group rotations working with DreamBox as well? And we're so quiet today. Okay, well, if you guys are good and don't have any questions, this last slide is just a resource for you to be able to go in and explore some different sites that house virtual manipulatives. It's a Google link that is connected to the link that Danielle just posted into the chat, but it will also be available on the resources page that will be shared at the end of this slide, excuse me, at the end of this presentation as well. You also have some opportunity to explore some of these blended learning resources that could possibly help push your instruction in the virtual setting. I've used each of these on my own and have found some success with those with students. I've also helped teachers to explore these as well, and they're beneficial if you're trying to engage and interact in a different way other than just making a book and assignment on a virtual setting. So I encourage you to explore these. They're all free for you. There's no cost to any of them. Just kind of see what works for you and what can help support your instruction. So I will turn it back over to Jackie and let her close us out.
Thank you, Kendra and Melissa, for all that wonderful information. You know, we definitely learned a lot. We learned, you know, a lot about how we can integrate, you know, DreamBox into our daily routine, starting with how can we intentionally provide them that time to complete those lessons, then to digging deep into the data and really looking at those standards to help us drive instructional decisions, you know, with groups that we're working with in the classroom, as well as how could we start utilizing some of these resources that Kendra had shared, you know, and use DreamBox in other ways with our small group instruction. And so we definitely appreciate your time and your commitment in helping all our students, you know, enjoy and appreciate and learn mathematics. The one thing that we just ask is for you to please give us some input on today's learning. And this will also give you an opportunity to ask any additional questions, you know, especially after you absorb all this information. And if you have a phone, you can scan that QR code to give us some feedback and ask your questions. And then I'm also going to share the link in our chat feature just in case, and you can click on that to also complete the survey. It's just a short survey. We definitely value your input, and this input will be used to help us determine some next steps on what we could do to continue to partner up with you. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you for joining.
Bye.